The Croth Dominion ruled the galaxy with a single philosophy: asterisk strength is law. The weak suffer. Asterisk. For centuries, they had conquered, enslaved, and broken entire civilizations. The strong thrived. The weak served. That was the way of things. Then they found humanity. At first, the Croth dismissed them: soft-skinned, short-lived, lacking natural weapons. Perfect for labor. Humans were added to the cattle lists, another species to be worked until they broke. But the Croth didn't understand. Humans didn't fight like the others. They didn't cower, didn't beg. They watched. Captain Elias Vance had been silent for months. He endured the beatings, the hunger, the back-breaking labor. He watched as the Croth dragged in new slaves, children of the Velm, a fragile species with wide, terrified eyes. The Croth overseer, a hulking brute named Karks, liked to make examples. Today, he held a Velm child by the throat, claws digging into soft flesh. The little one gasped, limbs flailing. Pathetic, Karks snarled. Asterisk, this is what happens to the weak. Asterisk. The other slaves looked away. They knew better than to interfere. Vance didn't. He stepped forward. Karks paused, amused. Asterisk human. You have a death wish. Asterisk. Vance's voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like steel. Asterisk, you don't hurt the helpless. Asterisk. Silence. Then laughter. The Croth warriors roared, fangs glistening. Asterisk, you think your rules matter here? Asterisk, Karks sneered. Asterisk, you are nothing. Asterisk. Vance didn't blink. Asterisk, try me. Asterisk. The laughter died. Something in his tone, something wrong, made the Croth hesitate. Humans weren't supposed to sound like that. Not unarmed. Not outnumbered. Karks snarled and threw the child aside, turning fully to Vance. Asterisk, fine. Let's see how long your rules last. Asterisk. The first blow cracked ribs. The second split skin. Vance didn't fight back. He just took it. And then, as Karks raised his fist again, something even more impossible happened. A Velm slave, small, trembling, stepped between them. Asterisk, no. Asterisk. Karks froze. Another slave, then another, moved forward. Not attacking. Just standing there. The Croth warriors exchanged glances. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Slaves didn't protect each other. Slaves didn't defy. Vance spat blood and smiled. You don't hurt humans, he repeated. Asterisk, and now? You don't hurt them either. Asterisk. The Croth didn't understand. That was their first mistake. Because humanity's greatest weapon was never strength. It was making the galaxy remember what was right. And that was a rule even the Croth couldn't break. The pit stank of blood and burned flesh. Karks had thrown Vance into the arena as punishment, not for fighting, but for defiance. The Croth didn't execute rebels. They made them entertain. The crowd roared as the gates opened. Across the sand, another prisoner staggered forward, a Zithian, their carapace cracked, limbs trembling. Predators by nature, Zithians were usually ruthless in the pits. But this one was half-starved, one eye swollen shut. A death match. That was the game. Vance rolled his shoulders, testing the fresh bruises. The Zithian hissed, claws flexing, but there was no real threat in it. Just fear. The Croth spectators leaned in, hungry for the first strike. Vance didn't move. The Zithian lunged, not at him, but past him, toward the weapons rack. A desperate scramble for a blade. Vance could have stopped them. Could have snapped their neck before they got close. He didn't. The Zithian grabbed a serrated knife, whirled, then froze. Vance hadn't even turned around. Go ahead, he said, voice rough. Asterisk, if that's what you need to do. Asterisk. The Zithian's breathing was ragged. The knife shook. Silence stretched. Then, with a choked sound, the Zithian dropped the blade. The crowd erupted in boos. Karks snarled from the observation deck. Asterisk, fight, you cowards. Asterisk. Vance bent, picked up the knife, and tossed it into the sand between them. Your choice, he said. Asterisk, but I won't kill for their amusement. Asterisk. The Zithian stared at the weapon. At Vance. Then slowly, they kicked it away. The Kroth were on their feet now, bellowing in outrage. This wasn't sport. This was insult. Karks slammed a fist on the controls. The arena gates groaned open again. This time, a pack of cyber-enhanced Vor-hounds prowled out, saliva dripping from metal jaws. Trained to kill anything that refused to fight. The Zithian backed up, a low whine escaping their throat. Vance stepped in front of them. "Run when I say run," he muttered. The hounds charged. Vance moved, not away but toward them. He sidestepped the first, drove an elbow into the second's spine. The third lunged for his throat. He caught its jaws with bare hands, muscle straining as the teeth gnashed inches from his face. Asterisk now. Asterisk, he barked. The Zithian bolted. Vance twisted, using the hound's momentum to hurl it into the others. The creatures yowled, tangled. He didn't wait. He grabbed the discarded knife and sliced through the lead hound's neural implant. It spasmed, collapsed. The crowd's fury turned to something else. Something uneasy. Karks's voice cut through the noise. Asterisk, enough. Kill them both. Asterisk. The remaining hounds regrouped. Vance braced. Then a shot rang out. One of the hounds exploded in a burst of sparks. Then another. Vance whipped his head around. Up in the slave galleries, a dozen figures stood at the railings. Humans, Veln, even a few Kroth deserters. And in their hands? Stolen shock rifles. The Zithian hadn't run. They'd gone for help. Chaos erupted. The Kroth guards scrambled as the slaves opened fire, not at them, at the arena's restraint systems. The force field flickered. Died. Vance didn't hesitate. He vaulted onto the nearest hound, driving the knife into its cortex. It shrieked, bucked, and he rode it straight toward the observation deck. Karks's eyes widened. Vance leaped, crashing through the transparasteel. He hit the deck rolling, came up with shards glittering in his fists. "You forgot the rule," he rasped. Karks drew his plasma whip. Asterisk, there are no rules here. Asterisk. Vance smiled. Asterisk, there's one. Asterisk. And as the slaves surged into the arena behind him, for the first time in Kroth history, something impossible happened. The chains broke. Not just the physical ones. The ones in their heads. By the next rotation, every slave in Compound Delta knew what happened in the pit. Not the fight, the choice. The human had protected a Zithian. The Zithian had returned with allies. The Kroth had lost control. Small things. Impossible things. The overseers doubled the beatings. It didn't help. A Veln child slipped extra rations to a wounded human. A Kroth guard found his weapon jammed, not by sabotage, but by a fellow warrior who looked away when prisoners whispered. The cracks were spreading. Vance woke to a boot in his ribs. Not a guard, a Zithian, the same one from the pit. They dropped a stolen medkit beside him. Asterisk, why? Asterisk, the Zithian hissed. Vance dabbed at his split lip. Asterisk, why what? Asterisk. Asterisk, you could have killed me. You didn't. Asterisk. Asterisk, not my style. Asterisk. The Zithian's mandibles twitched. Asterisk, we don't do that. Protect others. Not without reason. Asterisk. Vance shrugged. Asterisk, now you do. Asterisk. Silence. Then the Zithian reached into their carapace and pulled out a shiv made from scrap metal. The Western Guard Tower, they whispered. Asterisk, its power core is unstable. A strike here, asterisk, they etched a diagram in the dirt, asterisk, and the entire grid fails for 12 minutes. Asterisk. Vance studied the crude map. Asterisk, why tell me? Asterisk. The Zithian stood. Asterisk, because you were wrong. We do have a reason now. Asterisk. They vanished into the shadows. By dusk, the plan had reached human ears. Then Veln. Then the others. No grand speeches. Just a touch on the shoulder, a glance held too long. The Kroth never noticed. They were too busy laughing when a human work detail deliberately smashed a shipment of fusion coils. The punishment was brutal, 20 lashes in the square. The human didn't scream. That night, every slave in the compound dreamt of fire. The fusion coils weren't an accident. Vance watched from the smelting pits as Croth engineers scrambled to contain the damage. Their containment suits shimmered under emergency lights, cursing as they handled unstable cores with trembling claws. A human shouldn't know how to overload Croth power systems. But Lieutenant Chun had been a plasma engineer before capture. The Zithian Shiv map burned in Vance's pocket as he counted guards. 2 less on the western perimeter. Their absence wasn't coincidence, it was pattern. The compound's heartbeat thrummed through the grated floor, its rhythm changing. Karks knew. The overseer's boots echoed through the prisoner blocks that night, dragging a limp Veln behind him. The child's breathing came in wet gasps, one wing bent at unnatural angles. This one stole rations, Karks snarled, throwing the small body into the central yard. Asterisk, you protect thieves now? Then watch what protection buys. Asterisk. His shock whip crackled to life. Vance moved before the lash fell. Not to attack, to kneel between Karks and the child, turning his back to the whip. The charge seared across his shoulders, smell of burnt flesh mixing with ozone. The yard held its breath. Karks raised the whip again, then froze. Every human in Compound Delta stood. Not charging. Not even threatening. Just standing. The Veln prisoners rose next. Then the Zithians. The Tarken laborers. The Croth guards' weapons wavered between targets. Karks's laugh came out strangled. Asterisk, you think this changes anything? One act of defiance. Asterisk. Vance spat blood onto the dirt. Asterisk, not defiance. Just the rules. Asterisk. Asterisk, your rules mean nothing. Asterisk. Asterisk, then why are you sweating? Asterisk. The whip struck again. Vance took it. Then Chun took the next. Then a Zithian Vance didn't even know. By the 7th strike, Karks's arm trembled. The prisoners didn't. When the alarms blared, Western Tower going dark exactly as predicted, no guard moved to stop the surge of bodies flowing toward the breach. The Croth had made one fatal miscalculation. They thought breaking required violence. Humanity proved some chains snap from stillness. Darkness became their weapon. The Western Tower's collapse didn't just kill lights, it severed the neural shock collars. 12 minutes of freedom pulsed through Compound Delta like a living thing. Vance moved through the chaos with surgical precision. Human hands passed tools to Veln claws. Zithian carapaces shielded Tarken bodies from stray plasma fire. No speeches. No battle cries. Just motion. Chen reached the armory first. Croth weapons required biometric triggers, impossible to fire without Croth DNA. Chen's solution was brutally simple. She jammed a stolen shock rod into the security port and let the overload do the work. The explosion took her left hand. The armory doors hissed open. Vance caught her as she stumbled. Stay down. Chen grinned through the pain, shoving a plasma rifle into his chest with her bleeding stump. Make it count. They struck like shadows given teeth. Not toward the gates, toward the command nexus. Karks's voice still crackled over the compound speakers, demanding order. Vance's stolen rifle made sure those demands died with him. The real shock came after. When the surviving Croth warriors threw down their weapons. When the first Veln child walked unchained past Karks's smoldering corpse. When the Zithians didn't slaughter their former captors, but instead dragged the wounded to makeshift med stations. The compound's main display screen flickered to life. Not with Croth sigils, with a single phrase, translated into 100 languages by hands that remembered freedom. You don't hurt humans. And beneath it, newer, bolder. Or those they protect. Across the galaxy, other slave compounds received the transmission. Some Croth commanders laughed. Others checked their security protocols. The smart ones started packing. The message burned across star systems like wildfire through dry grass. Croth High Command reacted with predictable fury. Fleet Admiral Vrax's hologram snarled across 7 battlecruisers' bridges, his carapace plates quivering with rage. One compound falls to vermin and you panic? Glass the planet. His tactical officer hesitated. The mining facilities are replaceable. That message is not. But lightspeed lag worked in Rebels' favor. By the time Vrax's order reached the sole remnant system, Compound Delta stood empty. Not abandoned. Relocated. Vance studied the asteroid field's shifting patterns through stolen binoculars. The Kroth would come hunting, but first they'd assume the slaves had fled to the outer colonies. Not holed up in the dead zone's radiation belts, where 6 hijacked or haulers floated silently with systems dark. Chen flexed her synth hand, watching the false limb servos whir. We bought maybe 48 hours. Then we move fast. Vance turned to the gathered species, Veln elders, Zithian warriors, even a pair of disgraced Kroth medics. They'll expect us to beg for help. To hide. A Tarken engineer clacked her pincers. What's the alternative? Vance activated the holomap. The projection showed Kroth supply lines pulsing like arteries across the sector. We don't ask for freedom. He zoomed in on a vulnerable relay station. We take theirs. The plan was insanity. It worked anyway. When the Kroth scout ships reached Compound Delta, they found only 3 things. 1. The words "you don't hurt humans" scorched into every wall. 2. Every shock collar detonated in perfect unison. 3. A single working comm unit broadcasting on all frequencies. Vrax himself took the call. The hologram showed Vance sitting calmly in what looked like a mining shuttle's cockpit. You've made a fatal error, Vrax hissed. Vance checked a non-existent chrono. Actually, your reinforcement should be hitting the Tarkin homeworld right about now. Vrax's mandibles twitched. The Tarkans were loyal subjects. Their planet was heavily fortified against. The tactical display lit up with distress signals. Tarkan defense platforms were firing inward. Vance leaned closer. Funny thing about slave races. Once they realize their chains are imaginary. He made a bursting motion with his hands. The transmission cut. At that exact moment, 6 haulers emerged from the asteroid belt, not fleeing, but accelerating toward the Kroth fleet on collision courses. Alarms wailed as the massive ships bore down. Vrax roared for evasive maneuvers. Then all 6 haulers vanished into jump space simultaneously. Not a suicide run. A distraction. While every Kroth eye was fixed on empty space, the real strike force hit Relay Station Theta. By the time Vrax realized what happened, half the sector's slave collars had been deactivated remotely. The other half started self-destructing in Kroth cities. The relay station's fall sent shockwaves through the Dominion. Not from the explosions, though plasma fires still licked the station's shattered hull, but from what it broadcasted in its death throes. Every slave collar's kill code. Every Kroth warship's patrol route. Every black site location. The data dump spread at light speed, unstoppable, burning through encryption like acid. Vrax's hologram flickered above the war table, his image degrading as rebel jamming intensified. Contain this. I want every. The transmission dissolved into static mid-sentence. That silence spoke louder than any rebel manifesto. Across 100 worlds, Kroth overseers awoke to find their shock staffs inert. Slave quarters stood empty. Armories had been cleaned out not by force, but by workers who simply walked in and took what was theirs. The Dominion's collapse didn't come from fleets clashing in the void. It came from a Veln child walking up to a Kroth guard and handing him a water flask. From a Zithian warrior standing between a lynch mob and their former torturer. From a single phrase scrawled on walls in 100 languages. You don't hurt humans. Vance watched the dominoes fall from a stolen Kroth command ship's bridge, Chen's synth hand flying across navigation controls. They're scrambling, she reported. Whole battle groups diverting to protect core worlds. A Zithian tactical officer hissed laughter. While we hit their undefended supply depots. Vance studied the star map. Crimson Kroth strongholds winked out by the hour. Not yet. Every head turned. He zoomed the display on a single unremarkable system. Kroth Prime's shield generators are here. Take those down. The Tarken engineers' pincers clattered in realization. Their homeworld becomes vulnerable. Won't work, argued a Veln elder. Even unshielded, their orbital defenses. Vance overlaid another data stream. Kroth defense protocols. Patrol rotations. Blind spots. They designed their entire system to stop invading fleets. A pause. Not a single boarding pod slipping through the cracks. Chen's grin turned feral. The plan was suicide. It was also very human. When the assault came, it defied every Croth tactical doctrine. No grand fleet engagement. No bombardment. Just 37 volunteers, humans, Veln, Zithian, Tarken, plummeting through atmosphere in a damaged cargo pod. The Croth never saw the real threat coming. Because it wasn't the explosives they smuggled past security. It wasn't even the shield generator's destruction. It was the live broadcast from Croth Prime Central Spire, showing former slaves standing unarmed before the High Council's terrified faces. Vance's voice carried across the galaxy as he lowered his weapon. Asterisk, your turn to surrender. Asterisk. The High Council surrender transmission reached every corner of the Dominion in 11 minutes flat. Not because of rebel hacking. Because Croth communications officers let it through. Vance stood in the ruins of the Spire's observation deck, watching as orbital defenses powered down one by one. The view should have been triumphant, warships standing down, escape pods jettisoning from command vessels, the first free transports rising unchallenged from 100 slave worlds. Instead, his hands shook. Not from exhaustion. From the weight of what came next. Chen found him staring at the dismantled shock collar in his palm. We won. Vance closed his fist around the broken device. Winning was the easy part. Across the chamber, the surviving High Council members knelt under Zithian guard. Their carapaces bore the same stress fractures as the collapsing Dominion. The eldest, Councillor Vex, raised his head as Vance approached. You'll execute us now. It wasn't a question. Vance tossed the dead collar at Vex's feet. We don't do that. The Crotha's mandibles twitched. Then, trial? Imprisonment. Worse. Vance activated the holoprojector. You're going to watch. The display showed the first Croth worlds falling to rebel forces. Not to pillage. Not to conquer. To disassemble. Docking rings where slave ships once berthed being converted to civilian ports. Armories becoming medical centers. Shock collars melted down into irrigation piping. Vex made a choked noise. This is madness. You have the power to rule. And we're giving it away. Vance zoomed the display to show the newly formed Galactic Concord, Veln, Zithian, Tarken, and yes, even Croth representatives sitting at the same table. Starting tomorrow, every species governs itself. Together, we keep one rule. The projection changed one final time, showing a child's drawing scratched into a prison wall somewhere in the ruins of Compound Delta. You don't hurt humans. Or those they protect. Vex stared at the crude letters like they were a live grenade. This can't work. Vance turned to leave. Funny. That's what Kark said too. Outside, the first sunrise in generations broke over a free Croth Prime. The light caught on the spire's shattered transparisteel, scattering rainbows across the city below where former slaves and former masters already moved through the streets together. Not in harmony. Not yet. But without chains. 3 generations later, the rule survived when empires hadn't. Professor Calyx adjusted his ocular implants as the hologram stabilized. His mixed species class leaned forward, Veln Winklaws tapping data slates, young Croth mandibles clicking in anticipation. Today's lesson, he said, activating the archival footage, covers the fall of the Second Dominion. The projection showed battlecruisers darkening a planet's sky. Not ancient history, just 40 standard years ago. When a Croth warlord had tried reviving the old ways. The students already knew how this ended. Calyx froze the image at the crucial moment. Note the human merchant fleet's position. A cluster of unarmed civilian ships hung between the invading armada and a defenseless colony world. Not a single weapon among them. Just hulls painted with that familiar phrase in 100 languages. A Tarken student raised a pincer. Why didn't they flee? The professor toggled the playback. The human comms officer's voice crackled through time. Asterisk, you don't hurt humans. Or those we protect. Asterisk. Silence. Then. The Dominion fleet's lead ship powered down weapons. Then the next. And the next. By sunrise, not a single shot had been fired. By sunset, the warlord swung from his own ship's airlock, executed by his crew. Calyx shut off the recording. Who can tell me why this worked when planetary defenses failed? A young Croth female stood, her carapace gleaming under lecture hall lights. Because the rule isn't about strength. It's about... She struggled for the human word. Contagious morality. The professor nodded. And what does that mean practically? The student touched the phrase tattooed on her forearm in flowing human script. That hurting others now hurts you. Not physically. Socially. Economically. She gestured to the hologram. That warlord didn't just lose the battle. His name became unspoken. No trade with his worlds. No marriages to his bloodline. No songs remembering his deeds. Calyx smiled. And why is that worse than death for a Croth? The entire class answered as one, because we remember. The bell chimed. Students gathered their materials, one human lingering as others filed out. Professor. The boy held up an ancient shock collar from the museum collection. Is it true they never needed to enforce the rule? That just, having it was enough. Calyx took the relic, running fingers over its rusted electrodes. Oh no. They enforced it. He activated the wall display, showing security footage from a mining asteroid 20 years prior. A human stood over a cowering Croth slaver, plasma pistol aimed. Say it, the human growled. The Croth whimpered, you don't hurt humans. The pistol didn't fire. It didn't need to. Every witness carried those words forward like a virus. Final section? A far future coda showing the rule's ultimate legacy. The child's fingers traced the words carved into the ancient space station bulkhead, each letter worn smooth by centuries of touch. You don't hurt humans. Her Croth tutor watched from the observation deck's viewport, where the galactic core burned brilliant behind them. Can you read the older script beneath? The girl squinted at the faded markings. It says, or those they protect. Good. The tutor's mandibles clicked approvingly. Now tell me why this station keeps the original human wording when modern law protects all species equally. The child's tail flicked in thought. Around them, diplomats from 17 systems floated through the Zero-G memorial, some pausing to touch the engraving like a religious relic. Because the humans never claimed it was their rule, she said finally. Just that they'd enforce it first. A human historian drifting nearby chuckled. Close. We knew any species could say don't hurt us. The revolution started when we said don't hurt them instead. He tapped the bulkhead. This isn't a human monument. It's the first place multiple species risked their lives to protect others without bargaining. The tutor guided the girl to the next exhibit, a shattered shock collar displayed beside its access codes. And why preserve these? The child knew this lesson. To remember the price of forgetting. Above them, the station's AI voice announced the anniversary ceremony. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy gathered in the central chamber where Vance's original transmission still played on loop. Not just humans and Croth. Not just former slaves and masters. But the Zenthri who'd joined the Concord 50 years after the war. The Quellex who'd never known oppression. Dozens of species who'd adopted the rule not from fear, but because it proved better. When the holograms activated, showing Compound Delta's first rebellion, something unexpected happened. The Croth ambassador stood. Then the Veln. Then everyone. Not in protest. In repetition. As Vance's recorded voice said, you don't hurt humans, 10,000 voices, from 100 worlds, answered. Or those they protect. The child felt her tutor's claw tighten around hers. She didn't understand why the old Croth was trembling until she saw the moisture gathering at his eye ridges. Across the chamber, human diplomats weren't smiling at their victory. They were nodding at their irrelevance. The rule didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to everyone. When the ceremony ended, the child lingered at the bulkhead one last time. She pressed her forehead against the ancient engraving, whispering the words that had toppled empires. You don't hurt humans. Somewhere in the station's depths, a new generation of diplomats argued over trade routes and border disputes. But here, at the heart of everything, the only rule that ever mattered stood inviolate. Unchanged. Unbreakable. Alive. Word count asterisk 1000. Final hook asterisk asterisk. The rule didn't belong to them anymore. Asterisk. Humanity's ultimate victory is becoming obsolete.